years. He has also taught university courses, supply chain management, project management, negotiation for a startup, cross-cultural communication, and has also been a mentor to deliver complex consulting projects for various types of companies. Rupin combines academic excellence with industry expertise in providing coaching and mentorship in an effort to make organizations simple, sustainable, and scalable. With more no overdue, Rupin, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Should I just start with sharing my screen, or?
Yes, as you want. Maybe you want to also make an introduction, or just start with the webinar directly.
Yeah, I'm Rupin. So first of all, thank you, Alida, for an extremely generous introduction. I couldn't have said it any better than that. So yeah, and thank you everybody for taking your time. I see that there are actually overwhelmed by so many participants. So I hope I'll be able to share my experiences and a little bit of expertise that I have in this subject. So yeah, I have academic experience as well. So my idea is usually to provide like evidence-based research or data-driven insights and try to apply them to project management in practice. So yeah, I combine both academics and industry, and I have quite a lot of expertise in project management and leading projects on various methodologies and technologies. So that is enough about me. So I think let's start about a little bit more about this talk. I'll see if I can share my screen. Is it visible?
Okay, yes, is it visible? It's
right.
Perfect.
So today's talk is about project management in IT, and with a little bit of focus on agile methods and frameworks. So this is me. I've already spoken a lot about myself. Alida has given me an introduction, but I mean, my contact information is here. So if you need to contact me or connect with me, you can send me an email or check me out on LinkedIn. So yeah, so let's start. So I will begin by answering a question that I have been asked before. Is IT project management relevant? Because it is a skill that doesn't seem to be like really tangible. But to be honest, the answer is yes, it is extremely relevant. It is a specialized competency because a lot of companies, I mean, if you want to be competitive, if you want to be aligned with, if you want the entire organization to be aligned with a particular goal, you need a skill and expertise that brings everybody together, that allows the company to sort of collaborate and communicate. So this is where project management is important. It is also a very current field because you even have like PhD programs in project management. So you have a lot of very good research that is going on in academics. You have very good knowledge models that are coming out. Interesting questions are being researched. So this is a very lively and a very active field in terms of new knowledge being developed and new frameworks being introduced into the industry. Project management, it offers you validation and verification in terms of what you are implementing. So it ensures that you are building the right product and also that you are building the product right. So that's why you need project management. It gives you leadership, it gives you a focus, it sort of aligns the organization to the outcome, which you won't have if you don't have a project management sort of center of excellence in your company. So it is an extremely important skill that you need to bring people together, to bring organizations aligned with what you want to do. So yes, if you ask anybody, any expert, then yes, they will say that it is a very required capability in your organization. Now, what is the outcome of this talk? I noticed that a lot of you are very experienced managers and leaders, so you probably know more about this already than I do. So one objective is maybe that you can sort of take this as a refresher and revisit some of the concepts that might have rusted up a little bit in your life. So it'll sort of serve as a reminder. For those who are new or those who are curious, I mean, you will understand some of the terms, technologies, tools that we use in Agile and in other forms of project management. And hopefully you will learn some things that might help you increase your chances of running a project successfully. I say increase your chances because, I mean, there will be failures and uncertainty, which is part of your project. So these will just help you maybe cover reduce certain ambiguity or uncertainty and help you maybe increase your chances of or reduce your chances for failure. So I think this is broadly the outcome that I hope to achieve. I hope each of you will take something out of it. That will be great. So having said that, there are certain minimum things that you would need to do as a project manager. These are almost non-negotiable things. So these are not in any particular order. They're not sequential. They are just 6 activities that you should be performing as a project manager. First, probably the most important thing is to actually getting to meet the people. You have to identify who are your stakeholders in the organization, in the project. You need to meet them and try to identify their importance to the project and what influence they have, because based on that, you will be managing your stakeholders according to their importance, according to the influence that they have in the organization. You have to speak to them to get to their motivations. What are they expecting from the project? What is the overall objective as well of the project, and prioritize your goals in the project along with everybody else. So that's an important activity that you have to do. Once you have these in place, maybe you need to have an idea of what you are trying to achieve. What are you building? Maybe you have some features already in mind, or you have some user stories that you have that you can sort of come up with, and a sort of a high-level release plan of by when you want to deliver these. Maybe some kind of high-level estimates as well. These are just numbers that you can sort of come up with at the beginning. You will, of course, modify them as you have more clarity. But again, you need to have some idea of what you are trying to build and by when you want to implement this, which will then go into sort of a high-level project schedule, which can be as lightweight as you want or as detailed as you have information for. So this would be the artifact that you will use to negotiate with your management, with the customers, with the teams. So you should have some kind of calendar or schedule or some kind of very high-level plan at the beginning, at least. Then you will always have problems in the project. You will have risk. You will have to deal with change. So you will again need to have some kind of plan by which you deal with both corrective and preventive action. So you will have to deal with problems and risk and changes all through your project. And lastly, driving the project. So this is what will pay your bills. So you are in charge of this entire process. You will drive the project from start to finish, and all these activities are going to be your responsibility. So these are 6 non-negotiable things that you will have to do. What you do inside each activity is up to you. It depends on your relationship, your expectations, and the company strategy. So, but these activities will have to be done in all circumstances. So this is your basic guideline as an IT project manager, right? So let's go into a little bit more detail. So I think as a project manager, you need certain things to be in place that you will have to establish or initiate or try to put in place. You need a management style, you need a delivery method, you need a governance layer around your project, and you need a data collection mechanism to manage your project. So these four things should be in place all throughout your project to increase your chances of implementing a good project. So just keep these in mind, and we'll take a closer look at each of these quadrants. So if we start with management style, I mean, these are two, I'll talk about the two polar opposites. So at one end, you have a really hard style, which is very quantitative, data-driven, numbers-driven. So it is quite sort of a command and control. The essence here is that you have a problem and you have to solve it. So the focus here is on control. So it is very direct. It's very focused on the solution. Right. The complete opposite of this is the softer style, which is very qualitative. So here you are searching for contextual relevance. It is very collaborative, it's very consensual, it's very democratic. Here the essence is essentially on trying to ask more questions, trying to structure your problem. You may not have a very clear idea of what you're trying to do. So you start off maybe with a bit of a problem statement, and you and along with the team, as you work through the project, you sort of negotiate, you collaborate, you discuss a lot, and so you structure the problem, and then you work towards a solution. So the focus here is on experimentation. So you are constantly learning, you are reworking the problem, you are building a new thing, and so it's not so much control as it is negotiation with your team. So these are diametrically opposite approaches to management style. So if your role in each of these is, if it's a hard style, the project manager is an expert. But if it is a softer style, the project manager is a facilitator. So in real life, you would be oscillating between these two styles, because I mean, it's not going to be the entire project is not going to be a quantitative approach or a qualitative approach. You have to know when to switch. You will have to know when to issue more control, when to sort of step back a little bit. So that would be based on your skill, your experience, and how you read the project based on what is happening, based on if there are any problems, if you need a more experimentative approach, or if you need more direct approach with certain things. So you have to decide where in this line you want to be, and you can change, of course, as in how you see fit. So these are the two broad project management styles that we have. So moving on to delivery methods. So again, here we have two very popular methods we use. One is called the waterfall, which is traditional method. Now, I'm not very happy with this word, waterfall, because it really isn't a waterfall, in my opinion. I mean, you can have a waterfall which you have a river and it just falls vertically down. That can also be a waterfall. So it goes from point A to point Z with no stops in the middle. So I prefer the word cascade, because that's what happens. It goes in stages. But since I haven't written a paper on this, so I have no right to use the word cascade. So we'll go with waterfall since it's accepted. So yeah, the idea here is that you have to finish like a large part of an activity or a stage before you can progress to the next stage in your implementation. So, for example, if you are in the design phase, you have to finish about 80% or 90% of your design-based activities before you can even start your build and implementation. So this means that in between two stages, you have a lot of handoff. You have to sign off your work. You have to seek approvals, and you have to have a good enough document or a case before which you can proceed to the next stage. So this means that it is extremely sequential, and it's quite rigid. So you don't have room for a lot of change or negotiation in this model. If you look on the right side, you have a triangle which has its three vertices. You have scope, schedule, and resources. So these are the things that you use you combine these and you deliver a quality product. So in this framework, in the waterfall method, your scope is usually fixed. You already know in advance what generally you are going to build. So there isn't much negotiation in terms of scope, which is fixed. But you estimate on your cost and your time, because that will change throughout your project. So the waterfall is a very predictive process, because you know in advance what you're going to build, and it is quite a long-sighted view. I mean, you can see far in advance where you are going to be. That's why it's a predictive process. So it is very heavily plan dependent, and you estimate based on your scope, but you're going to change your cost and your schedule. So your cost and your schedule are always sort of moving estimates. Right? So this is briefly the waterfall method. The other one, which is also very popular, is Agile, which we'll talk a lot more about today. So Agile is very lightweight. It's a framework which is generally incremental. It is based on flow. So you're always working on a subset of the scope. You take a small subset of the scope, the parts that you are the most sure of, the parts that have the most maybe the most value, or the most or the highest priority subset of features. You then execute those in a short time frame, test it and release it to the customer. Then you go back and take another subset of requirements. You execute those, test it and release it, so on and so forth. So this is a framework where you deliver business value very quickly and very often. So you can use it to deliver increments very fast, or you implement like a continuous flow of delivery. So this is how Agile is very different. It accepts change, and it is quite flexible in how you implement it. So this is different from the waterfall approach. And on the right, if you see that triangle, it is inverted, because here your scope is not fixed. In fact, your scope is going to change, and Agile in fact works on very uncertainty in scope. So you estimate your scope, but usually your team and your time is going to be fixed, because you might have like implementation cycles of like every 2 weeks. So in that case, your time is always going to be 2 weeks, and you have like 10 people maybe working for those 2 weeks. So those two things are fixed, but your scope will change. Like every 2 weeks, you have the opportunity to change your scope. So your scope is going to be estimated. So this is the exact opposite of the waterfall model. So therefore, Agile is actually quite adaptive. So you don't know in advance where you're going to be 6 months down the road. So you are going to change your approach depending on how your scope changes. So this is not plan driven, it is driven by value. So you have your scope, which you assess, you assign value to it, and then you run your process depending on the value of your item. So here again, so you are estimating on your features, not on your time and your cost. So these are the two differences. And how do you choose a delivery mechanism? I mean, there are several ways. I mean, I like this article. It was written by these scientists in project management field. So they came up with 5 criteria that can provide you with some information on when to choose which methodology. So you can use market conditions, you can use customer involvement, innovation type, modularity of work, impact of mistakes. So, for example, if your market is very volatile, the requirements change very frequently. In that case, Agile would be a better candidate for your project development, as opposed to if your market is quite stable, you already know generally what is going to happen. So in that case, Waterfall might be a more suitable framework. Again, take example of I don't know the modularity of work, for example. If your project is such that you are not able to test often, and if your changes are going to be expensive, in that case, you should probably choose a waterfall method, as opposed to if you're in your work, if you're able to have like rapid iterations, if you can increment often, then Agile would be a better candidate. So you have certain things that you can look at. I mean, you can download this paper by Rigby and his friends, and it is a simple paper, so which gives you very good information on how to choose a good methodology. Right. So this is a bit about delivery method. So now, if you go a little bit deeper into Agile, Agile works on discovering a product and then delivering a product. So in your discovery phase, you sit with your team and you brainstorm, you get this huge list of ideas, which then you have to test these based on a certain filters. I mean, if you see that there is a funnel on the top left, and there are 3 circles there. So you check each idea. For example, for usability, is the idea valuable? Is it usable? Can there be some benefit from that idea? That's one check. The second check is it technically feasible? Are we able to implement it with the resources that we have? And the third check is business viability. Is it going to make any money? Can we monetize the idea? So if we get good answers to these 3 checks, then it goes down through the funnel, and we can then make it into hypotheses. So say you have 100 ideas and you filter them across down to like 20 hypotheses. Then you run quick test experiments on these hypotheses, and then you validate these, and then it enters what we call a product backlog, which is a validated idea. So this is the input for the delivery process. Now you will use the product backlog, which is the artifact, and then use these to build your features. And you could do these with several ways of Scrum or Kanban. This one is talking about Scrum, but we can also use Kanban. So Agile is a framework where you will first have your product discovery, and then you have your product delivery. Again, you can go to this article by Stefan Volpes, and it's quite good. So this will give you a very broad, high-level picture of how you work with Agile. Right? Now, it is important to again know there are certain events that happen in Agile in order. So, as I said earlier, you have an idea that you select for validation. That is the first step for Agile. Then once you validate the idea, it becomes a product backlog item, right? Which is then the input for your delivery phase. So the third thing in the timeline is your backlog item. It becomes a sprint backlog item, which would be the the input for your actual delivery cycle. And then you start work on the item, then your item is complete after the testing. So it meets your definition of done, which is an organization-wide sort of agreement of when an item is considered complete. So it has to sort of meet a checklist of things that have happened for an item to be considered done. And then it is released to the customers. So this is the event sort of timeline when you talk about Agile. There are two time frames in Agile which are important, which you should be checking and tracking. One is called the lead time, which is the total time between when an item enters the backlog to when it has been released to the customer. That is the lead time for an item. And cycle time is the time when the item is actually being worked on. So when the work starts to when it has been tested, but not yet released. So that is the cycle time. And you should manage these as part of your metric. So this is just something to be aware of as a project manager. It will be useful for your management. Right. Now, if you talk about Scrum and Kanban, these are two of the most popular development methods that we use when we talk about implementing Agile projects. There are similarities as well as differences. The similar thing here is that both use the product backlog as an input. So they are both running off the product backlog. However, in Scrum, you usually have you do have a fixed time in which you are executing part of your product backlog. So assuming in Scrum, we have what we call as sprints. So you have a predefined time frame for each sprint. So say if you have a project which is composed of 10 sprints, and each sprint would be, say, 2 weeks. So you select some items from your product backlog and you build a sprint backlog, which is going to be the artifact which will be used to see in that time frame of 2 weeks. And then after each sprint, you reset your sprint backlog and build a new one for the next sprint. So your sprint backlog is always cleared at the end of every sprint. In Kanban, you don't have a sprint backlog because you don't have a time frame. So it's more flow-based. You will take items from your product backlog as and when you have the availability of the person who is going to deliver them. So you might have one person who is working on an item for, I don't know, 10 weeks. You might have a second person who's working on an item for like 2 weeks. So the second person, after he has finished, will take an item from the backlog and start. So this is based more on flow. It's not time bound, while Scrum is based on constant increments and iteration. So Kanban is actually much more flexible and even more lightweight than Scrum is. So again, you have to choose which one seems to be more appropriate for your project. And there are ways to do that, as you might see here. So again, here, it depends what your project is about, how you want to run it. The most important thing here, I think, to remember is that Scrum is you can't sort of Scrum is used by a single team, so you don't share Scrums. But a Kanban is used across the organization. You can share a Kanban board, but you usually don't share a Scrum board. So Scrum has it focuses on sort of how many features you can execute in time, while Kanban is focused more on sort of reducing your lead times, right? Then again, Scrum, it doesn't accept changes while you are in your sprint. In Kanban, you can accept change anytime. So it's a bit more flexible that way. So again, you have ways to decide which methodology, which framework works better for you. So this is again a good white paper. You have a lot of information available on this. So these are just two of the more popular ways in which you can implement the software project. So just take a look at some of the ideas out there. It's quite helpful. Estimation is interesting in Scrum. Sorry, in Agile. We use mostly what we call party poker. Oh, sorry, not party poker. Party was planning poker. Party poker is a different thing altogether. So planning poker. Here, what happens is that every team member gets all these cards, which are generally in Fibonacci order. So the objective here is you are always going to make a relative estimation, not an actual estimation. So it starts with you select like one item from your backlog or one user story, and everybody in the team reads that story, and then you have to choose a card. Everybody chooses a card to assign a value to that story. And the objective is everybody has to ultimately reach a consensus. So if everybody finally agrees that that story is worth 5 points, then that becomes your baseline story. And it's important here that these numbers are just points or values. They are not. It is not a time unit. So it's not. So the 5 it doesn't mean 5 hours. It just means 5 points. It could be 5 beers, 5 cats, 5 spoons, whatever. But once you have that number, then that becomes your baseline estimate. And then you select every item and you estimate it based on your baseline item. So say after that you take another story, everybody reads that and estimates it. They have to estimate it based on the story, which is the baseline story. So based on that, if they say estimated that as if they think that the second story is 4 times more complex than the baseline story, then they should choose 20 as the estimate for the second story. So on and so forth. So it is a relative estimate. It is not, and it's not a time-based estimate. It is based on whatever some sort of point. So the important thing here to remember is also that every Scrum teams may have different ways of estimating. So one team might estimate a story at 8, the other team, it might estimate a story as 5. It doesn't matter because they are in separate teams. As they are doing relative estimation, all their estimates are based on whatever they have estimated individually. So I think, so we don't compare estimates across teams, right? That is important. So that is the most important thing to know, that these are not time units, and you shouldn't compare estimates across the teams, right? So that's something about the estimation. Next, let's talk a little bit about Agile leadership. Now, when you talk about traditional leadership, as we saw a bit earlier, the somewhat harder style, that is more carrot and stick. It's more command and control. You are talking about people's extrinsic motivation. So you are sort of forcing them to do a certain thing. But when you talk about Agile, it becomes more transformational. So you are talking about collaborative sort of methods. You are talking about empathy. You are talking about a more democratic style of leadership. So here you are talking more about intrinsic motivation. So you try to find out what actually drives the people in the team, and then you set up the methods that help those people to grow. So in Agile leadership, your focus is to make people grow, right? Both business as well as people. So you are focused very highly on outcome of both the business as well as the people. So this is a very transformational style of leadership, right? In your Agile way of working. So So this is something that you would need to be aware of when you are project management in an agile environment. It's more about encouraging the people. It's more about transformation. It's not so much about a direct approach. So this is just two different paradigms when you talk about agile leadership. I mean, as with all projects, we also have to collect data and metrics. There are a lot of metrics available, but I mean, the objective is to have enough information to manage a project, but not so much that it becomes an overhead. So just collect enough data that you will actually use, rather than just collecting data only to have data. That is very against the process of being agile. You should collect as much information as you need, as is going to be helpful for you. So I mean, I use maybe 4 or 5 charts or graphs. So 3 of these are actually quite helpful, the ones here. So if you talk about something called sprint burn down, this means that on the vertical you have story points, which is your estimate, and on the horizontal you have a sprint, which is the number of days. So this indicates the red line indicates or rather the blue the staircase indicates how many, it's called here as planned burn down, which means how many story points are left after each day. So for example, in the day 2, you should have 25 story points left. So you have implemented 10 story points after day 2. That's according to the plan, but in actuality you haven't, because it's a straight line. So this tells you how much work is left, and it shows your efficiency. The same thing is in the product burn down chart, which is at the release level. So here, instead of days, you have each sprint. So it's the same thing. How many story points have you implemented? How many are left after each sprint? So say if you take sprint 1, I mean, you started from the beginning. You had to implement 400 story points. At the end of sprint 1, you have a number 300, which means 300 story points are left, and you implemented 100, which means, and then if you go to sprint 2, at the end of sprint 2, you have 247 story points left, which means you implement 53. So this also shows you the efficiency of your implementation. So anything that is above that, the ideal blue line, it means that you are a bit slow. So it means that you have sort of overestimated your capacity of efficiency. If it's under the blue line, it means that you've actually gone faster, which means that you have underestimated your capability. So this is a good tool to assess your efficiency in terms of delivery as well as your estimation mechanism. So you can use this quite well. The graph on the right is my favorite, because it gives you a picture of the entire work over time. So it talks about how many units are in which phase at any given time. So, for example, the green line shows analysis. The blue is the development. Orange is the test, and the last one is the deployment. So anything, say, in between the green and the blue line is an item which is in the analysis phase. Anything, the space between the blue and the orange indicates that those items are in the development phase, and then something between the orange and the red indicates that it is in the test phase. So this gives you a very good indication of your workflow. So the horizontal part would give you your cycle time, while the vertical line would give you how many items are actually in progress at any given time. So these are very good, I think, graphs that will give you a very good picture of your work. So the objective of, again, Agile metrics is to use the data to make to get some improvement, to turn it into action. Don't just collect data just because it's available. Collect only information that you are going to use. So that's one advice I would have. Collect minimal amount of data, only that which is going to actually help you. So these are some of the metrics that you can collect and take a look. And I've also added the sources so you can read these in more detail, right? So this is something about metrics that you would need to collect as a project manager. Right, so we're almost, we've got about 20 minutes, okay. So yeah, so the objective of project manager in Agile, there are broadly two objectives. One is delivering value. So you use your business model and then convert that into a value proposition. So a business model is inside within your company. It is where you create and capture value. So it could be things that are internal to your company. It could be your resources, your cost base, your infrastructure, your people, etc., and so forth. Right? You have to use that value that you have captured and make that into a value proposition which is external to the company. That is the value that you deliver. So you are converting, say a thing costs $5 for you to make. That is your business model. And then you are doing something to that and then selling it at $10. So that becomes your value proposition. So you are converted, you have captured $5 and sold it and delivered 10, right? So that is the objective of any project that you will execute. So you can do that with Agile methods, with scientific information, with learning routines. So this is one of the objectives for you as a IT project manager, to convert your business model into a viable value proposition to maximize your value. This is the first objective. The second objective is sustainability. So here your desired outcomes are modifiability, reusability. I mean, you have all these sustainability goals, especially if you're in the EU, you have a lot of goals that you have to fulfill and meet. So this is what your objective is in the end: how to make your product and your process more and more sustainable. So you have to look at efficiency, on time, within budget, and responsibility in terms of simple and sustainable processes. Right. So these are your two primary objectives: value delivery and sustainable development. And I think to end, these are my personal tips that would help. Maybe they help me. So the first thing is read an article, a paper, something that is new. Pick up and maybe apply one of those things in your projects. This is about project management. I mean, you have a lot of articles on project management, knowledge, consulting report. Just take one and try to apply it. Second thing is always search for simple and sustainable solutions when managing projects. So, like as I said, for example, data. Collect minimal amounts of data that you are actually going to use. Don't just collect data for the heck of it, as an example. So always search for simplicity, sustainability when you manage a project. And third, apply what works. Don't get stuck in methodology or frameworks. For example, if your Waterfall is working fine, use that. Don't have to do Agile. There is nothing worse than a bad implementation of Agile, which makes it worse than what it was pre-Agile. So apply what works for you, and try to, maybe if your project is already fine, just find some improvements. You don't have to change your approach just because there is something attractive out there that appears to be good. But so just apply what works. So these are my 3 tips, and I think that's it for me. So that's my session. And I think if you have any questions, I don't know.
Thank you, Robin, for this amazing presentation. We have a few questions. One of them is that, what is the most important, minimizing or optimizing timeline or optimizing resource use?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? What is the most?
Yes, what is the most important, minimizing / optimizing timeline or optimizing resource use?
Oh, okay. I think you have to actually do both, because you have to, I mean, whenever you have some kind of a project, you have to see how much, generally you have an idea how much time it's going to take, how many people you need. So you have to, your resource times your time, that has to be minimum. So just see what is going to help you more, whether it helps you more to maximize the time per resource, or if it helps you to with more resources with a little bit less time. But you have to, it's a trade-off, because it is expensive. It has more overhead if you are using more resources. So I think you have to find a sort of a balance with trying to optimize time versus resources, but you have to do both.
We have another question. Does the scope and size of project play a role in choosing the methodology?
I mean, when you talk about scope, if your scope is not very clear, then it's more beneficial to have a more agile sort of a framework, because agile means that you are responding to change. It talks about uncertainty, so you can build your scope and change it if it is if you are trying agile. But if you already have enough information from the beginning, you don't have to be agile. You can run it as a waterfall process. So again, it depends on how much certainty you have in your scope and how much ambiguity there is. Is it bound to change a lot? So it depends on that. So if there is a scope if there is a chance that the scope is going to change or the scope is uncertain, you should probably try to use agile.
Okay. Another question that we have is that this person says that he's a fresher with no experience. From where should I start for project management career? And would like to know in what way can I start a project management career?
Oh, this is takes me back 20 years. I don't know. I mean, I think what you can do is, I mean, the first thing you should do is you should try to familiarize yourself with most of the concepts and terminologies in both traditional ways and agile ways of working. And I think the best thing to do for you, if you are working already, try to see if you can start off as assistant to already another project manager. So you can start off by observing how projects are being managed. And if you start off, I think initially you will need a bit of a structure. So starting off in a more traditional way would help you, because agile needs a lot of expertise, right? So maybe agile is not the best to start off straight away. So start off with a project that already has that is ongoing, or it might already have quite a bit of structure, so you have the processes to help you as well. So try maybe a little bit more traditional if you're starting off.
Great. Another question that we have from Petra is a Scrum Master important? If yes, what are she's responsibilities, and from what side should he be develop the team or a business?
Interesting question. I mean, to be honest, I mean, I have been a Scrum Master and project manager in the same role. I mean, my role was both. It depends on your organization and how much they want to stick to like a really agile way. Because I mean, a Scrum Master is a role which is used only in the Scrum. So your responsibility is only to the Scrum team, essentially. So if you are talking about a Scrum Master, pure Scrum Master, then yes, I mean, it is important to a Scrum, because you will be the person responsible for removing obstacles to ensure efficiency and all that. But if Scrum Master is part of your role, for example, if you're a project manager of which Scrum Master is a part, then it is a sort of a high-level role where you are also in charge of other things in terms of coordination, in terms of administration as well, or you might have several projects. So a pure Scrum Master, I don't think is, I don't know if it's that common, but it is still used. So I have never actually been a pure Scrum Master. It has always been part of another role for me. So I hope that helps.
Great. Another question that we have is, which kind of Agile method do you prefer personally and why?
Which type of Agile?
Agile method.
Yeah, I mean, I have used both Scrum and Kanban. Scrum is a little bit more expensive in terms of it costs more in terms of planning, because you have to establish certain processes in terms of timelines, in terms of dedicated teams, and in terms of sticking to like a 2-week schedule or whatever. Kanban is a bit more flexible. It's not inefficient, but there is more scope for implementing a bad Kanban, because there is no time commitment and there is no team commitment. So you are solely focused on the sort of self motivation and self efficiency of the team, because like you don't have a Scrum Master in Kanban, so there is nobody who's actually checking whether you are executing it on time or doing the implementation on time. So if your resources are mature enough, if they are experts, if they're skilled, if they're highly motivated, Kanban is an exceptional system. But if you need more structure, then Scrum is slightly probably the better option.
Great. Another question. This person said, thank you for the presentation. I understand the Agile is supposed to be flexible, and as you said, the end goal may not be clearly defined. But how are we supposed to know how to go forward without knowing where the destination is? Should there be a clear preliminary goal or product vision to help driving product development?
I mean, yes, you will always have a vision of the product, but when they say that it's not clear, it means that the scope is not clear. I mean, if I still want to build a car, for example, but I don't know what features the car has, what is the engine size, how many wheels? I mean, wheels of course 4, but I mean, how many? What kind of safety features do you want in the car? So you have the end goal basically, but what is included in that goal you don't know. So that you will experiment as you go along. So your scope is actually quite flexible. But if I compare it with, say, a traditional system, so you still have the car, but in that it also tells you, okay, I need 4 seats, I need so much in this is the size of my engine. So everything is described in your traditional system. In Agile, you only know that you want to make a car. So you can start off with making a bicycle and then change that to make it into a motorcycle, so on and so forth. So you have a lot of flexibility in terms of your actually what features you want to incorporate, but you have to end up at a car, yes.
Thank you. Another question is, does the Agile method applicable to government projects?
I mean, this is a very difficult question, because you have, especially government projects are the advantage in government projects is that you have a lot of money, so they're well funded. They are usually of very long-term contracts, long drawn-out contracts. So they usually use traditional ways, but more and more organizations are trying to be agile because they want more efficient turnover of their resources. So I mean, to be honest, government contracts are mostly still the old-fashioned traditional contracts. because of the reason for being a slightly older economy, older systems, they already have a established way of working that they don't want to change. So that's also why they are still quite traditional.
Thank you. Another question. What would be the recommended size of a project portfolio?
A recommended size for a project portfolio? I mean, I can only talk from experience. I mean, I've had like I was in charge of an insurance company here called Scandia. I mean, the project portfolio was about 12 projects of about 5 to 8 people each, so about 100 people in one portfolio. But again, it depends on what you mean by the portfolio. But normally it's about 5 to 8 projects or products.
Okay, because this person said that he has or she has about 8 projects ongoing right now.
It's about 5 to 8 to 10 or whatever it is.
Another question is there any certification that fresher can do and land into job of project management?
Yes, I mean, you can try for a certification called as a project management professional, which is certified by the Project Management Institute. That is a more traditional method. Or you can also become Scrum Master certified if you want. So yeah, there are several things, but I would recommend a PMP certification and a Scrum Master certification. So these two would help you. Should help you. I don't know if they will, but it's a start.
Thank you. How can learn easier and faster Agile methods as a beginner?
How to learn it? Okay, I think yeah, this is I think related to the earlier question when you asked that somebody was a fresher. So I think this is just, I mean, you just have to start. I mean, especially if you are working in a smaller company in a more high-tech environment, you will already be in a sort of agile environment. So just observe, try to learn how you are implementing your. I mean, if you have already seen like Kanban boards or Scrum boards, then just see how they're working, how the board moves, how the process flows, and you will pick it up quite fast. So just be involved in a more agile environment, especially if you're in a smaller firm. It's easier to be in an agile environment.
Perfect. Okay, we will do the last question.
Okay.
And it said that is it release management, titled software release manager, have the same scope as the project manager, or they are two different roles? And does it considered a different career path?
I mean, yeah, it would probably be a different role because it is the focus for a project manager is also talking to the customers, to the stakeholders, to the product team, to the development team as well, testing and all that. Release management is to ensure that your releases are happening on time and that the customer is getting the benefit as we have promised to them. So the project manager would work with a release manager and they will agree to a sort of a release plan. So and then the project manager has to sort of fulfill that release plan that they have agreed upon. So they are usually separate roles.
Okay, thank you so much, Rupin, for answering all the questions.
Thank
you everybody for attending to this webinar. We are going to send a follow-up email tomorrow, probably with the recording of the video and the presentation and the teacher contacts. And some of the people has asked if they can contact you, Rupin, through LinkedIn and ask you a few questions still.
Yeah,
so
sure.
So feel free to do that. Thank you so much and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a nice day.
Bye.